Hello and welcome to this special for Crusade for Mithranor. I'm Renegade Paladin and I play Torindil.
Hi, I'm Boshek. I'm the Dungeon Master.
And today we are going to go over the house rules that we're using for this campaign. The basis of the base system we're using is Pathfinder First Edition, but we bring in a lot of stuff from D&D 3.5 and make some alterations to the rules and use some optional systems. So
yeah, this is a sort of house rule document that's evolved over the 20 or so years we've all been playing, and has kind of come to what is currently our kind of optimal or favorite way to play the game.
Alright, so we are going to start with character creation. So we use the point buy method, 20 point buy, unless the party is 6 or more, which of course, as you know, it's not. And Paizo published hardback books are fair game, and the paperback splats are and first party 3.5 are available pending approval from the GM. So you want to go over why we do it this way?
Sure. I like a big sandbox, and I also understand that more options means more powerful player characters. That's not really a big concern for me, because the biggest power gamer or optimizer at the table is the one sitting behind the screen right now.
That is certainly the case.
I really like Faerun as a setting. The Forgotten Realms are kind of where we all got our start playing, and there's so many good source books in 3rd edition, from the original Forgotten Realms campaign setting to things like, I don't know, Heroes of Ruin, or the various area source books, and a lot of the 3.5 stuff has huge nostalgia value for me. I understand that Pathfinder First Edition is a more balanced approach to the 3.5 chassis, so, when something newer is available, please use that. But I'm not going to throw out, decades of books that we have in our possession just because there's something slightly newer available.
Yeah, there's a reason Torindil is a war priest instead of a divine meta magic cleric.
Oh, sure. I think War Priest has some things over the DMM cleric.
Yeah, a few things, but not fantastic.
You got a longer day. That's true. That's absolutely true. And your levels are more fun. Pathfinder did a very good job of making sure that every time you level up, you get a little Treato.
Yeah, so anyway, moving down the list, characters start with 2 traits, one of which must be a campaign trait, which is pretty standard for Pathfinder. Like almost every AP does it that way.
Sure. Yeah, I went into making this player's guide with sort of the idea of, I'm going to write a player's guide in the same vein as a player's guide for adventure paths. And it just kind of came together like this. I was like, well, what's the first thing every adventure path has? It has its own traits that kind of set it apart from every other adventure path. So that's the first thing on here. That was the first thing that came to mind. And we'll jump to the traits later. I wrote a trait for a variety of character options, and I'll be happy to talk about those when we get to them.
Yeah, we use the background skills system from Pathfinder Unchained. And the reason is, spelled out there in the document. More skills is more better.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to take a character and have them have a background without feeling like you're handicapping yourself. I don't know where we got it from, but in 3.5, we always had a house rule where you would get 1 bonus craft or perform skill rank every level. And then when Unchained came out, was like, hey, just do this. We were like, great, we're just going to adopt this as an official thing. And it didn't feel... it just felt even better to have it kind of officially supported.
Yeah, and for those not familiar, I can open Torindil's character sheet here real quick. So under skills, there's adventuring skills and background skills. Background skills tend to be like the knowledges that don't identify monsters, handle animal, profession, perform, that sort of thing. And you get two bonus ranks per level to use on background skills.
Yes, that's actually an option that's fully supported in the Pathfinder 1E module for Foundry, which is really great. Props to the devs on that. It is a wonderful community project, and it lets us do this every week. It's great to be able to sit down and play with people who are halfway across the country.
Yeah, so every every player was expected to write a paragraph or two describing their character goals and past, etc., which we have all done, and I'm sure we'll go over all of that when we do the character spotlights.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's not really a rules thing, but it's right here in front of us.
Yes, I wanted to make sure everybody kind of at least had an idea of who their character was going into it. I don't think that's asking a whole lot as a DM. I'm not saying, hey, give me a short story or a short novelization, dedicate your NaNoWriMo to this. But at the same time, I wanted to, people to have motivations and kind of just a thought of who they are. That last one is after choosing your trait, you should have a connection to at least one of their party member. I kind of stole that from, I think it's the Fate system. We played a very short game, almost a one-shot of a Dresden role-playing game, and the one thing that stuck with me from that was all the characters kind of had to know each other going in, and you had to work together to do that. I thought that was really fun, making your characters do that, so I started doing that in my home games as well.
And which is why Torindil and Relnace are childhood friends, and Jinx discovered Mossel's petrified form.
Great, yeah, it worked out absolutely well. Since we're kind of on the subject of character building, do you want to jump over to the traits?
Sure. So not all the campaign traits didn't make it into Foundry, at least the ones we didn't take. So here we are in the Google Doc that was the Master Player's Guide, and we're just going to go over them real quick.
Yeah, I didn't want to program everything in there, including things people weren't using. As characters have rotated out, or if we've had a player join, I will additionally program in further traits as they're needed. They can reference them here.
Alright, so, and these are all, these are mostly deeply rooted in either the history of Mithranor or the Dales or Cormanthor.
Correct.
So, Veteran of the Weeping War, you are descended from one of the great houses of Mithranor at the time of its fall.
Right.
So,
I really wanted an elf-centric campaign for my players to play. I was like, what kind of campaign would I want to play in? And I said, hey, you know what? Mithranor is really cool. I love the second edition vibe of it. I went out and I bought the 2e source book, print on demand from the DM's Guild, which has been just a wealth of information, and kind of took inspiration from that. And I was like, I want everybody to be tied either to just Cormanthor through Elven heritage, or by being a Dalesman, or by having an interest in the old city of Song.
Yeah, so Veteran, and one thing we'll notice in Veteran of the Weeping War, it's pretty standard trait, gain that figure of favorite enemy with a +1 trait bonus, but gain the trait take the trait a second time to gain the Foe Slayer story feat.
Oh yeah, well,
they don't all do that, but
no, I was like, what's something special or weird I can do with these traits? And I was like, what if you took a trait twice, you can take some feats twice, and it gave you a further bonus, kind of deeper into what it was doing. And I was like, there's some feats that kind of aren't great. Maybe if a trait, which is usually about half the power of a feat, gave you a feat that was sort of a half-power feat.
Yeah, the story feats don't tend to be great, at least not until you fulfill them, and even then some of them aren't.
No, they're exactly that. And I kind of believe in the ability of the Dungeon Master to kind of, kick the rules of the game around, and you could give those out as even story rewards, and I've done that in home games before. It's fun to be like, here's something that you would have never taken, but it's yours now, enjoy.
Yeah, Mythal Scholar is the campaign trait that Torindil took, because I really don't like my magic blowing up in my face when I'm a buff-centered caster.
That is correct. Yeah, that one's really simple, and I thought that would be a kindness to the players to say, hey, if you are not a fan of the wild magic that permeates the corrupted mythal of Mithranor, here's something you can do to mitigate that. You can mitigate it even further by taking it a second time. Now, the third one here, Hair in a Set, is a reference to our home games, where we had constructed, using the rules from 3.5's DM Dungeon Master Guide 2, an organization of duelists, elven duelists, kind of not dissimilar from the SCA. They do performances and practice their combat with each other. No one selected that trait, but it was there to put a smile on my face, and sometimes you just have to do that as the Dungeon Master, as you put a little treat in there for yourself.
Yeah. Warrior Out of Time was Mossel.
Correct.
And he chose the petrification route.
Absolutely. I unashamedly stole that idea from the first time I was exposed to it, There's a character in the video game Baldur's Gate 1 who is a petrified cleric. You can unpetrify her and she joins your party. And I thought that would be pretty cool to have someone who was in Mithranor, who knew the city at its height, come to the modern day and say, oh my god, what has happened?
I mean, also, elves could still be alive. Mithranor didn't fall that long ago.
Correct.
Only a
You
few
could have
hundred
played.
years, yeah.
You could have chosen to play like an middle age or old elf. That's perfectly fine. There's nothing that the rules probably don't want you to do it, but I would have certainly said yes as a dungeon master.
Yeah, and Harper. You know, the Harpers are... Anyone who's played the Realms knows who the Harpers are.
They have their fingers in every pot. As some of you might have guessed, Real Nase is a Harper, although the rest of the party isn't necessarily privy to that information. Real Nase's player was pretty interested in playing a Harper and has always had a fascination with not only musical characters, but just kind of the behind-the-scenes good guy types who meddle maybe a little bit too much. I chose a bunch of the 3.5 kind of multi-class feats that lent themselves to Harper classic sort of looks as a way to kind of say, if you want to take this trait twice and really be a Harper, here's something you could do.
I don't know that any of us did take a trait twice, but yeah, the option is interesting.
I don't know that you did. Well, on that subject, I think one of you did, but they're not in the campaign yet. And that brings us to the Moon Magic Practitioner feat. I really liked, in the 3.5 Dragonlance book, the moon cycles that affected magic, and it was terrible in practice at the table. But with the VTT having an inbuilt calendar, it's really easy to enforce this kind of rule where you say, hey, look at the moon phase, you get a bonus to your magic or a penalty to your magic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not something you'd really want to keep track of on a tabletop unless you're a fanatic note taker.
Yeah, and I'm pretty active as a player in games, and I found it to be cumbersome and really difficult. And it's easy to forget, especially because you're between sessions and stuff. But through the magic of technology, we allow these programs to just kind of remember these things for us, and we can look and see, oh, hey, it's the full moon. Our moon magic practitioner is going to be a little stronger, have a little bit better spellcasting.
Yeah, and Devotee of the Sun for Lathander. Again, we're leaning hard into the realms here because of the Dawn Spire outside of Mithranor.
Oh, yeah. I had to write this trait up. I had no idea about the Dawn Spire until I started reading that second edition source book. And, Lathander is Faerun through and through, so we had to write us a Devotee of the Sun trait. Now, in the original party, Rilnase, Mossel, Turandil, and Jinx, there is no Lathanderites. But, characters change out, and we may see one come in later.
And Treasure Hunter, I believe that's the one Jinx went with. I might be wrong.
You are correct. The little halfling has sticky fingers, and this is exactly the kind of trait that a character like that is going to want to take. It gives somebody a reason to want to go to Mithranor. It gives a character who maybe wants to be a trap finder the ability to locate and even disable traps. Kind of like there's a similar trait in Mummy's Mask, so I thought that would be perfectly fine as far as power level goes.
And a skill unlock for free. Yeah, let's see, Darkwood Stalker was not Real Nazis because she went with the Harper, so I don't know that anyone took that.
Yes.
And Soldier of House Miritar, which also leans deep into the Realms lore.
Correct. Yeah, as some of you may know who are fans of the City of Song, the Miratars have a large part to play in the retaking of the city when that happens.
Which we are getting to. And that is all of the campaign traits. So, let's get back to where we were and keep going through the house rules.
Sure, we left off at character advancement.
Yes, we did. So, swap tabs real quick. Okay, back in.
Good deal. So GM counter rolls hit points is, I think, our oldest house rule, isn't it?
we were certainly using it when I started playing 25 years ago.
Yep. So the idea is, instead of taking the average, which everybody knows is boring and not random, and leaving your life in the hands of a spiteful dice, you ask your GM to counter roll you. You say, hey, roll me a d8. I'm going to roll d8. I'll take the better of the two. And it does two things. One, it sort of mitigates a little bit the variance of having poor hit point rolls for a character, which, if you want a really lethal campaign, that's fine. But we like to get attached to our characters and play them for as long as we can. And two, it's the DM involved in the leveling process, which I really like. You know, you don't need to have your finger in every pot, but you say, oh, my character's leveling up. Yes, I'll counter roll you. And that was even more important 3.5 because characters would level up at different times.
Yeah, variable XP was a real pain.
yeah, it absolutely was. We use milestone leveling, which is right after fractional BAB here. Fractional BAB is another Pathfinder Unchained rule. It just kind of makes sense, and it doesn't feel good to get punished for multi-classing when the system is already set up to punish you in a couple of different other ways. We use milestone leveling because if we didn't use milestone leveling, the characters would outlevel the adventures way too fast. As you're going to see with these, we stay at the same level for a very long time. It was talked to with the party, and they said, hey, we want to play all the cool sounding adventures you care to run at every level. So they are stuck at levels for a good long time.
Yeah, and actually, we get through a lot of story, and that's honestly at this point in our gaming careers, that's more important to us than just, you know, exponentially leveling our characters as fast as we can.
Sure, yeah.
Fractional BAB is also an old rule. I think it was in Unearthed Arcana for D&D too.
Yeah, you used it a long time in a lot of your games. It didn't impact everybody, but I remember it being there.
Yeah, so, and the big one, we're using automatic bonus progression.
Absolutely. This is the second campaign we've used automatic bonus progression, and the other one's a home game I run on the side. I liked it enough that I said, you know what, I want to do this for this campaign as well. I do not like the constant scrabble for trying to get the big six, always worrying about getting your next +1, kind of looking at what would normally be a fun or interesting item, but it's got a big price tag on it and saying, well, I gotta sell this for the party so everybody can get a new cloak. I just didn't like that, and to be perfectly honest with you, I do like a Monty Hall campaign, and as you're going to see in this game, the characters are going to end up with an incredible amount of wealth, and automatic bonus progression just kind of keeps their base bonuses in check.
Yeah, we treat characters level as one higher on the chart because, honestly, ABP is written in Pathfinder Unchained is just a little too slow.
It is a touch too slow, and because I knew the party was going to be leveling up very slowly, they were going to feel that a lot more. And I wanted them to be able to have access to things like magic weapons or their ability boosting, their enhancement bonuses to abilities a little sooner.
Yeah, so speaking of which, you made several other alterations. Bonuses granted by abilities other than weapon and armor attunement are untyped. So basically, your ability score boosts stack with the ability boosting spells.
Sure, yeah, but there aren't other ways to get those through items, and I thought it probably wouldn't hurt for Bull's strength to always be, +4 strength. It's not breaking anything that it suddenly is worse at higher levels. Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's no better than any other buff spell, realistically, as a second level boost. It's actively worse than, like, Divine Favor, except in terms of duration as you get higher levels, and that's a lower level spell. And it's fine. It's absolutely fine. The only thing I've considered that maybe being an issue with is things like the deflection bonus and natural armor bonus to AC, but even that's not too bad, and I don't think it's going to be too bad. Monster attack bonuses scale so high and into high levels, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so, and speaking of the big six, they do not exist. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yep. And that includes items that kind of replicate those abilities. So, I think there's a headband of resistance. You can't get that either.
Yes, and animal companions are treated as one lower than your character level and also get automatic bonus progression. And
absolutely there. Player characters would be spending money on their animal companions, mounts, familiars. I don't know that I actually like giving that to them for free, but it was just kind of a band-aid solution. It hasn't been a problem yet. If it becomes a problem, just because you started playing a game doesn't mean that it can't still be changed. Just like encounter design doesn't end when we roll initiative.
Yeah. And finally, weapon and armor abilities do not cost attunement points, and the accompanying chart did not make it into Foundry.
Yeah, I had trouble importing that. That's
So basically,
basically,
there's a price chart for, like, you can have a flaming sword that's not +1 because +1 swords don't exist. But there's a price chart for adding. There's a custom price chart for adding special abilities to a weapon without having a base enhancement bonus.
Correct. Oh, this didn't make it into a Foundry. Speaking of modifying the campaign document, some time ago I added an addendum that bracers of armor start at a +1 base armor bonus. So I wanted the iconic bracer of armor, which was showing up on a lot of NPCs I had, to actually do something. It felt bad kind of looking at it and saying, like, this guy has bracers of armor and they're his item that he has, and they just don't do anything when it's an iconic core item that's been in the game since,
like forever.
Since inception. Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, that's character advancement. Character class alterations.
First thing you're going to see here is more Pathfinder Unchained. We love our Pathfinder Unchained, and that's fighters gain combat stamina. We do not opt for the everyone gets combat stamina, although the changes to the rules and feat system are kind of in the line with that of more feats for everyone, get rid of feat taxes, and make it so that you can do your thing sooner and it doesn't cost you as much to do something interesting. Another Unchained change is the Summoner. Use the Unchained Summoner.
Yep. Of course, I like the original Summoner was absolutely busted. Don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah.
And Rogue, Monk, or Barbarian, you may choose the core version or Unchained.
Yes.
For Barbarian,
recommends the Unchained version, although the Barbarian is definitely just a side grade depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, the Barbarian, there's arguments for both ways. Rogue is a straight upgrade. And yeah.
Correct. And Monk is mostly an upgrade. And then, yeah, Barbarian, it just really depends on what you're doing with your Barbarian. We're not going to get into that here, but I promise you there are use cases for both.
Yeah, mainly whether you want to dual wield or use a big two-handed weapon. Anyway. Sure. So no one's playing a monk, so the next one didn't really come into play.
Yep.
And we are using because we're playing in Faerun, we are of course using the Forgotten Realms Pantheon.
Yes, that results in some work for the DM on the back end because obviously the domains don't necessarily transfer over one-to-one to the Pathfinder rule set, so we do a little homebrew here and there. But it hasn't really been an issue. We'll touch on what kind of things we change with that when we look at Turandil, because he has some powers from Corel and Larethian.
Yeah, and changes to races. We changed elves back to how they were how they are in D&D. We don't need to sleep.
Correct. I really wanted to give them back the finding secret doors automatically from 3.5, but I was like, that's too much. Sorry. Not sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. And
I know I'm the biggest elf fanboy here.
Other than that, it's like non-core races case by case, and there's some cosmetic changes to abilities. Correct.
So we move on to combat.
Yep, the critical hit and fumble decks.
You know that among a lot of tables, critical hit and critical fumble decks are probably a little controversial. I like them. I think they're fun and interesting, and we use the rule system where a player character cannot fumble more than once in a combat, and that mitigates it quite a bit. And realistically, the fumbles aren't that awful.
Also, NPCs that don't have names do not draw in the crit deck.
Correct. We have not had an NPC draw in the crit deck yet, I think. Certainly not across the first level. That is level 2, which is where everyone started.
Yep. Healing starts at 0 when you receive magical healing. You start counting from 0 instead of running up for your negative life total. I think the obvious exception to that is Breath of Life if you're actually dead, because otherwise the spell automatically succeeds.
Yes, yeah. That's where you look at something as a player and a DM and you say, oh, this is how this is meant to work. But other than that, this is a house where we've also used for a long time. One, it gets rid of the negative math problem, which I think we've had some players kind of struggle with a little bit in the past. And 2, it kind of makes in-combat healing slightly more potent, where it's always just kind of a bad decision anyway.
Yeah, and let's see. Your familiars and animal companions mount to set or act on your initiative just to avoid cluttering up the initiative tracker, and especially with mounts, that's a huge pain in the ass if they don't.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I like to have familiars, animal companion stuff go on the player's turn. It's just better, cleaner combat. I have an alternate dying system I wrote that no one uses or cares about, so we can actually skip that.
Yeah, I mean, there might be situations where where Turandil would do that, but they haven't come up yet.
Yep. That's fine then. I was like, I want to make this more interesting. I want more drama, more like character kind of choices in combat whenever you're on the edge of death. I'm going to write this up. But nobody cares. So we'll skip it. On to the feats, which is far more interesting.
Yep, leadership only for parties of 4 or less, which yeah, that's
correct. We had a long time where we had a lot of leadership parties, and we had big old parties full of multiple NPCs, and it slows the table down quite a bit. It's not explicit here, but I think if you're running leadership as a DM, you should just have some NPCs the characters have met join them as possible cohort options, and not let them build their own cohorts. Maybe that's too much of the finger on the scales, but everybody who knows about leadership knows the problems that it has, and it makes more sense from a story perspective to say, oh, this character would like to join you. Like we saw in Castle Corellin, you've got the Seekers of the Misty Isle. I think any one of them would be a good cohort option.
Yeah, but none of us took leadership, even though they were.
That is correct.
So, anyway, weapon-specific feats apply to whole weapon groups. Like per the fighter weapon groups for weapon training.
Right. If you are a war priest and you take weapon focus, you can take weapon focus heavy blades, and it applies not only to your long sword, but also to things like bastard sword if you're using it, or even the chakram.
Which is why Turandil chucks chakrams around.
Right.
On the rare occasions when he needs to make a ranged attack. Let's see. 2-weapon fighting just scales instead of having the big feat tax.
Right, improved weapon fighting does. It still costs 2 feet, but it does scale.
And dodge also grants mobility. Weapon finesse grants agile maneuvers. So basically, we've gotten rid of a bunch of feat taxes.
Right. This was sort of inspired by the elephant in the room alternate rules, but I wanted to take my own spin on it because there's a couple things I didn't like about it, and if you're house ruling with a big document like that, you might as well just make sure you are absolutely satisfied with what you're getting out of there. I really like the idea, I don't remember where I read this, I read it somewhere, of having things like power attack and combat expertise, instead of getting them for free, having them give you kind of a bonus combat maneuver feat, so now your character has options.
Yeah, so point blank shot grants precise shot, combat expertise, and power attack. You can pick one of the requisite combat maneuver feats. And style feats, having the first style feat in the chain grants you the subsequent feats automatically.
Yeah, I think that's potentially fairly powerful, but at the same time, a lot of the styles are, in my opinion, too costly for what they do for the players. And I don't want my players to feel punished because they wanted to do something fun.
Yeah, the style feats are a 3-feat chain. I have literally never taken one under.
They are. You've never taken one. Let me tell you something. They are not 3-feat chains.
Yeah.
The second and third feats often have silly and ridiculous requirements. If you're looking at something like Moonlight Stalker 1 or I think like Elven Overwatch. I'm not sure. I don't want to name names and be wrong here, but some of them are just completely outrageous for what you get. And not in the this is very powerful way, in the why way.
Yeah, and we are wrapping up. And wrapping up here, we're into Miscellaneous. We use the alternate crafting rules from Pathfinder Unchained, which is a relatively complex system that I don't think we need to explain in full here. It's on the SRD, you can read it.
Nobody in this party crafts. I didn't know whenever I was writing this player's guide if I would have people who would want to craft, so I used those in my other home game, and they worked fine. So I was like, we'll put this in here as well. Same thing for magic item creation, and just that little addendum there. Some monsters built using Rule 0 underlings that have the 40 minion rule set. That is... If you're familiar with the minion rules, basically they are monsters that are normally just as threatening as the same monster would be, but they have just like one hit point. So it lets characters kind of down them in a single hit, while at the same time not having them be completely useless in combat. So it's just kind of a cinematic choice.
And I think that's about it for the rules. That goes because it goes from here. It goes into like the character building tips. Your favorite terrains and so forth.
Correct. We could touch on that another time. That does include the known effects of the malfunctioning mythal, which sort of affected some of the character choices, but we can get to those. Maybe we'll go over them before we have the party delve into the City of Song proper. It will be good for our viewers to sort of know what to expect and why things are happening the way they are.
All right. Well, in that case, that's about it for our house rules. So, I hope you've enjoyed, and if you have, please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the next adventure. This is Renegade Paladin and Boshek signing off.
Bye-bye.